Today I'll share a story so intense it'll send a chill running down your spine. Born in a frontier where the sun burns your back and outlaw boots echo through abandoned streets. This is the West, where fear rules at dusk, until someone decides it's time to fight back. It all began with a single act of defiance from a quiet drifter, small enough to overlook, yet strong enough to topple the cruelest reign Rattler's End had ever known. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Through the wavering heat rolling off the Arizona desert, the town of Rattler's End sat like a sun-bleached relic left behind by time. Its cracked storefronts and dust-choked streets hid troubles folks didn't speak of, not even behind locked doors. As late-day sunlight stretched long, jagged shadows across the empty road, the only thing moving was a row of wanted posters slapping against the wood, each one showing the same hard-eyed outlaw, Voss Emberfall, the feared leader of the Night Ravens. Before we dive back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this tale strikes a chord, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's chapter is something special. Inside the lone saloon, the usual lazy afternoon hush shattered under breaking glass and crude laughter. A band of rough men in red bandanas, Emberfall's scouts, had decided old Frank Whitaker, the saloon's piano man, needed a lesson for daring to ask them to settle their tab. None of them noticed the stranger who had just tied off his dapple-gray horse outside. A lean figure in a weather-beaten brown duster stepped through the batwing doors with the quiet prowl of a mountain cat. As he entered, the gentle jingle of his spurs was the only sound that dared to follow him. His face, shaded beneath a wide black hat, carried no emotion at all as he took in the chaos. To the bullies, he looked like any other sunburnt drifter seeking refuge from the desert's furnace. They had no idea they were staring at Rhett Calloway, known in certain whispered corners as the Shadow of the Territories. A man whose name seldom traveled, but whose deeds always did. Rattler's End hadn't always been a place where decent folks shuttered windows at sundown. Just 3 years earlier, it bustled with silver miners and families chasing hope. But that was before Voss Emberfall and his Night Ravens claimed it as their nest. The room went dead still the moment Rhett Calloway stepped inside, except for old Whitaker's ragged breathing as he tried to crawl upright. Broken glass crackled beneath Rhett's boots as he crossed the floor toward the bar, seemingly unbothered by the 5 ravens watching him with predatory curiosity. Behind the counter, Bram Litchfield, the gray-mustached owner, nervously polished a glass already cleaned smooth. "Water," Rhett said quietly, setting a coin on the bar. His voice was soft, but something in its calm weight made Bram's hands tremble as he filled the glass. Heat and road dust clung to Rhett's coat, yet his unshaken manner felt strange, almost jarring in a town held hostage by fear. The biggest raven, a brute with a scar slashing down his cheek, nudged his buddies and smirked. "Hey, stranger," he slurred, whiskey thickening every word. "You must be new around here. You not aware this is a private place?" Rhett took a long, steady sip of water without so much as turning. Through the dirty window, he spotted women rushing their kids indoors. A man hustling supplies from the general store ducked his head and quickened his pace. Fear ruled this town, visible in every stiff step and hurried glance. "I'm talking to you, stranger," the scarred man growled. Pushing back his chair, his spurs scraped an uneven rhythm as he swaggered toward the bar, one hand resting on his holstered gun. His companions spread out, itching for a show. Bram turned pale. "Mr. Rusk, please," he whispered. "He's just passing through." "Shut it, old man," Rusk Hanley snapped, stopping just a few feet from Rhett. "I'm giving our guest a taste of local manners." He reached for Rhett's glass, intending to spill it. What followed happened so fast that later, no witness could agree on how it unfolded. Rhett's left hand locked around Rusk's wrist before the man even touched the glass. His right hand stayed casually on the bar. Rusk's face twisted with shock and pain as Rhett pressed a precise point, dropping the brute to his knees with an effortless motion. "The water here," Rhett said softly, "is mighty fine. Shame to waste it." He let go. Rusk scrambled backward, clutching his wrist, humiliation burning through him. "You're dead," he hissed, reaching for his revolver. But before his fingers touched the grip, Rhett shifted, just enough to reveal his holster. He didn't draw, didn't even brush the handle. But something in the steel of his eyes froze Rusk cold. For the first time, Rhett turned fully toward the Ravens. His storm-gray gaze swept across each man. "I reckon Frank Whitaker could use help getting to the doctor," he said. "Why don't you boys lend a hand?" The Ravens exchanged uneasy glances. Rusk's hand hovered by his gun, sweat now rolling down his brow. The stranger's calm rattled him more than a drawn weapon ever could. "This ain't over," Rusk spat, backing toward the door. He signaled the others, who hauled Frank Whitaker out, far less bold than they'd entered. As the doors flapped shut, Bram exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't have done that, mister," he muttered, though a flicker of admiration slipped through. "They'll be back, and with company. Rusk is Voss Emberfall's right hand." Rhett finished his water, setting the glass down with quiet care. "Tell me about Emberfall," he said. "Tell me how he took Rattler's end." Bram Litchfield cast a wary glance at the saloon windows, then leaned in close to Rhett. His voice dropped low. "It started small. Protection fees," he murmured. "Then they took over the silver shipments. Anyone who refused to pay, anyone who stood up, they vanished." His words faded as his eyes drifted to a set of faded photographs tacked to the wall. Smiling faces, now just ghosts in a town that had forgotten how to fight. While Bram spoke, Rhett Calloway's gaze flicked toward the stairwell. Half hidden in its shadows stood a young woman, her expression carved from fear and something else. Hope, maybe. She slipped away the moment she realized she'd been seen. But not before Rhett caught sight of the bruises circling her wrist. The sun was dipping low, streaking the Arizona sky in a violent wash of red. Rusk Hanley would be back soon, and he wouldn't be alone. He'd be bringing hell with him, expecting to finish what he started. What waited instead would be something they'd never recover from. As dusk swallowed Rattler's end, Bram found himself watching the quiet stranger who hadn't budged from the bar, despite every warning. There was a stillness to Rhett Calloway that didn't feel like peace. It felt like a storm biding its time. Coiled, ready, like a rattler just before it struck. "They say Voss keeps most of his boys holed up in the old silver mine," Bram added, barely above a whisper. 30 men or more. They ride out from there, hit supply runs, harass the nearby settlements. He pointed toward another photo on the wall. This one showed a young man in a tin star. "We haven't had law here in 8 months, Bram muttered. Rhett's eyes settled on the image. "Eldrin Marrow," he said quietly. "I knew him. Good man. Quick on the draw." Bram blinked. Before he could ask how Rhett knew the dead marshal, the saloon doors swung open hard. Rusk Hanley had returned, and he wasn't alone. 8 more night ravens strode in behind him, bandanas blood red, eyes sharp in the dying light. And then came the man who commanded the room without a word. A tall, lean figure, silver-handled revolver glinting at his hip. Cade Thorne, younger brother of Voss Emberfall. "This the one?" Cade asked, his Spanish-tinged English crisp and deliberate. Rusk nodded, cradling his still-throbbing wrist. Cade walked up to the bar, his steps smooth, calculated. There was something polished about him, educated, dangerous. The kind of man who could speak poetry or cut your throat depending on the hour. "Senor," Cade said, offering a slight bow. "I must apologize for my men's earlier conduct. They tend to overreach." Rhett slowly turned on his stool, one arm resting on the bar. "No apology needed," he said evenly. "I'm sure they'll learn better manners going forward." Cade smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Ah, but there's a problem. In Rattler's End, respect means everything. My brother built this place with it." He motioned toward Rusk's bruised wrist. "You've shown disrespect." Rhett didn't blink. "Your brother didn't build a damn thing," he said, his voice slicing through the saloon's tension. "He stole what others built. There's a difference." The ravens stirred, hands moving subtly toward their weapons. But Cade raised his hand, keeping the peace for now. "You're either very brave or very foolish," he said. "Maybe both." His gaze narrowed. "May I ask your name?" "Smith," Rhett replied. "John Smith," Cade echoed, then chuckled dryly. "Of course, and I'm the King of Spain." He studied Rhett closer now. "You know, stories travel through these territories. Stories about a man who brings ruin to operations like ours. A ghost that moves without warning. They say he's just a shadow. Never stays long enough to leave a footprint." His hand drifted lazily to his revolver. "They call him the shadow of the territories, but surely that wouldn't be you. Because only a madman would walk into our town all by himself." From the staircase, the young woman, Avila, Bram's daughter, watched it all unfold. She had seen too many men try to play hero in this town. None had made it to a second attempt. "I'm just passing through," Rhett said, turning back to his drink. "Looking for work." "Then perhaps we can be of use to each other," Cade offered. "We're always looking for men with certain talents." "That move you used on Rusk? Where'd you learn that?" "Here and there," Rhett said. "Picked up a few things during the war." Cade's eyes sharpened. "Which side?" "Whichever one paid better," Rhett replied. Cade burst into genuine laughter. "A man after my own heart," he said. "Perhaps you'd join us for dinner. My brother returns tomorrow. He'd be eager to meet someone like you." Rhett let the offer hang in the air, then gave a slight nod. "Appreciate it," he said, "but I prefer to earn my meals honest." The saloon's air turned colder. Cade's smile faded. "I was hoping we could talk like folks," Voss Emberfall said flatly. "But you forced my hand. You've got till sunup to clear out of Rattler's End. After that..." He let the threat dangle like a noose in the air. As Voss and his men strode out of the saloon, Bram Litchfield exhaled shakily. "You ought to take their offer," he muttered. "The last fella that stood tall like you, they dragged him out of Bitter Creek face down." Rhett Calloway rose calmly, brushing dust off his coat. "They mentioned the old silver mine," he said, ignoring Bram's warning. "How far's that?" 3 miles north," Bram replied, shaking his head. "But you ain't serious. That place'll eat you alive." "I need to see what they're hiding," Rhett answered coolly. "And Bram, might want to keep your girl away from this place come morning. Things might get ugly." Bram's eyes widened. He'd never mentioned having a daughter. and Avila hadn't said a word to this stranger. Yet somehow, Rhett already knew more than he should. As Rhett stepped into the cold night, Avila crept out from behind the storage barrels. "Pa," she whispered, "do you think he's really?" "I don't rightly know," Bram murmured, still staring at the saloon doors swinging shut. "But whatever he is, tomorrow's gonna be a day Rattler's End don't forget." By dawn, Rhett was crouched atop a sandstone ridge overlooking the abandoned silver mine. His gray-speckled horse stood tied quietly behind him. Through his brass spyglass, he scanned the valley. Below, the Raven camp sprawled across the entrance like a nest of snakes. Black tents scattered like fungus, cooking fires curling smoke into the pale lavender sky. But it wasn't the campfires that caught his eye. It was the people being herded into the shaft. They weren't miners, at least, not willingly. Even from this distance, the chains glinted in the morning light. They wore torn civilian rags, eyes hollow, steps dragging. Rhett recognized faces from missing posters he'd seen pinned across saloons and sheriff walls from Dustwater to Lark's Hollow. A sudden stir near the mine entrance drew his eye. A man stepped out. Black clothes sharp as a blade, raven-feathered hat perched on his head. Even without the jagged scar that ran from his eye down to his jaw, Rhett knew who it was. Voss Emberfall. The infamous gang leader barked orders in quick-fire Spanish, overseeing the shift change like a war general. "Quite a view, ain't it?" came a quiet voice behind him. Rhett didn't flinch. "Mornin', Eldrin Marrow," he said low. Or should I say, ex-sheriff. Eldrin, the man whose face hung in the faded photo at Litchfield's saloon, once respected, now presumed dead, sat beside Rhett in the dirt. His skin was drawn thin, his mustache wild, eyes sunken. "They said I was dead," he rasped. "Truth is, I'm worse. I'm their bookkeeper now. Keeping tabs on stolen silver, slave labor, dirty deals." His voice cracked with shame. "They've got my wife and little girl locked up behind the shaft, in company housing." Rhett lowered the spyglass. "I know. That's why I'm here." Eldrin's eyes widened. "The territory sent you, after all this time." "Not exactly," Rhett replied. "Let's just say, I've got my own reasons for tearing down operations like this." He paused, eyes tracking every structure. "Tell me how it works." Eldrin didn't hesitate. "El Cuervo runs this place like a damn fortress. Guards change every 6 hours. That green door building used to be the assay office. That's where they stash the silver. Labor runs 12-hour shifts. 40 armed men between here and town. Families? They're in those old mining homes out back. Guarded round the clock. That's how they keep the others in line." His voice broke. "My Sarah. She's just 12. Rhett's expression stayed cold, but something stirred behind his steel-gray gaze. "I saw Cade Thorne in town," he said. "Looks like he's running things while Voss is here." "Yeah," Eldrin nodded. "Cade handles the town side, real sharp, educated in Mexico City. But Voss? That man's a demon. I saw him shoot 3 men before they even reached for their irons, and he liked it." Down below, Voss Emberfall was tearing into one of his men for sloppily guarding the prisoners. The man's mistake was met with a pistol crack that echoed through the hills. Then silence. "That's how he does it," Eldrin whispered. "Fear. Even his men are scared of him. The only one he trusts is his brother." Rhett quietly closed the spyglass and packed it away. "How often do they move the silver?" "Every 2 weeks. Next shipment's tomorrow night. They smuggle the silver by hiding it among regular mining equipment. stuff marked as spare parts or machine gear. The territorial deputies never give it a second glance. As for the miners' families, they're held hostage in the company houses. The men work the mines. Their wives and kids are kept under watch elsewhere. Any sign of disobedience from the workers, and their families pay for it. Any sign from the families, the men suffer. Eldrin Merrow's voice faltered, his fingers twitching with tension. Rhett Calloway stood, brushing the dust from his long coat. "You'd best get back before they know you're gone," Rhett said. "But before you go, tell me more about the mine. Any other way in besides the main shaft?" Eldrin nodded. "Yeah. There's an old ventilation shaft about a half-mile east. Comes out behind the assay office. They don't guard it, think it collapsed years back. But I've seen some of the kids slip through it, sneaking food to their fathers." Rhett gave a slight nod. "Good. Now, the woman at the saloon, Avila. What's her part in all this?" Eldrin's face darkened. "Voss Emberfall's taken a shine to her. Says she's gonna be his wife, doesn't matter what she wants. That why she sticks close to the saloon? Her father thinks he can protect her." Eldrin muttered bitterly. "You saw how well that worked out." Rhett mounted his horse in one smooth, practiced motion. "Get back to camp. Tomorrow night, when things start getting noisy, gather as many families as you can near that ventilation shaft. I'll have someone waiting there." "You're really going to take 'em all on?" Eldrin asked, disbelief in his voice. "Even if you are who they say you are, this is suicide." A faint, knowing smile tugged at Rhett's lips. "Maybe. But sometimes the only way to deal with rabid wolves is to step right into the den." He turned his horse toward the town. "Besides, I made a promise to your wife when she sent that letter for help, and I don't break my word." As Rhett disappeared into the distance, Eldrin watched with a mix of hope and dread. Back at the mining camp, Voss Emberfall inspected his men's weapons, completely unaware that the quiet drifter his brother had warned him about was about to blow the lid off his entire empire. The afternoon sun scorched the dry dirt streets of Rattler's End as Rhett rode back into town. The place was bustling now. Folks moving with purpose, heads down, avoiding the cold glares of the night ravens stationed around. The tension in the air was thick, the kind that comes from living under fear. As Rhett passed the general store, he caught sight of Rusk Hanley and two of his fellow ravens, Silas Keldon and Jace Hollister, hassling the shopkeeper, an elderly Chinese man named Brivin Hale. They were knocking items off the shelves, demanding higher protection fees. Behind the counter, Brivin's son, Little Fen, stood frozen, his fists clenched in quiet anger. Rhett dismounted smoothly, tying his horse to the post. The soft jingle of his spurs echoed like a warning as he stepped inside. Rusk turned, his expression darkening. "Still here?" he sneered, his hand drifting toward his pistol. "Thought the boss told you to ride out by dawn." "Needed supplies," Rhett said plainly, bending to pick up a can of beans the men had knocked over. He returned it to the shelf. "Mr. Hale, I'll need some ammunition. 45 caliber, 4 boxes." The ravens exchanged amused glances, then laughed. "4 boxes?" Rusk mocked. "You planning to start a war?" "Something like that," Rhett replied, his gray eyes locking on Rusk's. The laughter died in their throats. Before Rusk could snap back, the store door swung open. Cade Thorne strode in, his silver-handled revolver gleaming in the shafts of sun through the dusty windows. "Mr. Smith," he said coolly, his voice cultured with a touch of menace. "I see you've chosen to ignore our friendly warning. Just getting what I came for." Rhett answered, still focused on helping Briven straighten the knocked-over merchandise. Then I'll be gone. Cade studied him for a beat, his gaze sharp and calculating. You know, I've been thinking about our little chat last night. Something about you didn't sit right. He pulled a folded poster from his vest. So I sent a man right into Silver Springs. Turns out they had some interesting bulletins posted. Rhett slowly turned to face him. The store grew still. Tall fella, Cade continued, unfolding the paper. Gray eyes, moves like a cat. They call him the Shadow of the Territories. Shut down 3 major operations, one's just like ours. His smile turned thin and dangerous. Big bounty on your head. Could be anyone, Rhett said calmly. Gray eyes ain't rare. True, Cade admitted. But what really piqued my interest is the timing. You show up just as we're about to move the biggest silver load this territory's ever seen. Coincidence. The air inside the general store thickened like a brewing storm. Voss Emberfall's crew had fanned out across the floor, hands hovering just inches above their holsters. Young Fenn ducked behind the counter, while Briven Hale stood frozen, white-knuckling a broom like it might shield him from gunfire. I've found, Rhett Calloway said slowly, his tone cool and unreadable, that life gets interesting when coincidences start piling up. Voss let out a low chuckle. I couldn't agree more. You know, my brother's back in town today. His voice darkened with amusement. He's been itching to meet you, especially after I told him about your little stunt last night. He nodded toward Rig Fallon's still bandaged wrist. Maybe you'll join us for supper after all. Appreciate the invite, Rhett replied, keeping his voice calm, but I've got plans. I insist, Voss said, voice now edged with threat. Rig, he said, barely glancing at the man. Show our guest why it's impolite to turn down family. Rig grinned wide, already reaching for his revolver. But before steel even cleared leather, Rhett's hand flashed to a can of peaches on the shelf. With practiced ease, he hurled it, hard. The can slammed into Rig's wrist with a crack, sending his gun skittering across the floor. In the same fluid motion, Rhett's own weapon was out, the barrel aimed steady and cold at Voss Emberfall's chest. The other ravens tensed, weapons drawn, but Voss held up a hand. His grin didn't fade, but something behind it did. Impressive, he murmured. Truly. But you really think you can take all of us? Rhett didn't flinch. Don't need to. Just need you. Question is, he added, are you half as fast with that silver piece as your brother claims to be? Silence fell, thick and brittle. Then Voss let out another laugh, this one tight around the edges. You know what? He said, slowly backing toward the door, palms up. Keep your bullets, Senor Smith. Think of them as a housewarming gift. But I do hope you'll come to dinner tonight. El Cuervo would be heartbroken if you didn't. When they were gone, Briven sagged behind the counter, hands trembling. You should not have done that, he whispered in shaky English. They will come for you. How much for the ammunition? Rhett asked, ignoring the warning. No charge, Briven answered, almost pleading. Just, when they come, do not bring trouble here. Rhett set down a handful of silver dollars anyway. Your boy, he said, voice quieter now. He's got fire in him, but keep him inside tonight. Might get messy out there. As he stepped back onto the dusty street, Rhett felt eyes watching him from every window. The rumor would spread fast. The shadow riding out of the territories had made it to Ratler's end. El Cuervo would hear soon, if he hadn't already. Farther up the street, Avila was watching from the saloon window. She ducked away when she caught him looking, but not before he saw it. That flicker of something he'd seen in so many towns before the blood came. Hope. Nightfall swept in fast, and with it, the real work would begin. As the last rays of sun sank behind the mountain ridge, the saloon began to fill with ravens, more than the town had seen in one place before. El Cuervo's return had pulled them all in. Their voices roared with booze and swagger, spilling out into the darkened streets like poison. Through the dirty glass windows, townsfolk hurrying home caught glimpses of the gang's leader holding court, his wide hat ringed with raven feathers, casting jagged shadows in the lamplight. Meanwhile, in the stable behind the general store, Rhett Calloway was hatching something entirely different. "What about you?" Eldrin Marrow asked from the doorway, arms crossed. "You planning to take that whole pack on by yourself?" A ghost of a smirk crept onto Rhett's lips. "Not by myself. I've got something they're not prepared for. Chaos." He turned to Rig Fallon. "You still got any black powder stashed away?" The blacksmith's eyes widened. 3, maybe 4 kegs. Was saving it for, well, something like this, I guess. "Perfect," Rhett said, kneeling to scrawl a rough map in the dirt. "Here's the plan. In about an hour, I'm showing up for that dinner. While everyone's eyes are on me, Rig, you'll place those kegs here, here, and here." He marked 3 points like a battlefield general. "Drax," he added, glancing up, "you'll spread the word, quietly. When that first explosion hits, the townsfolk head straight to the smithy, not a minute before." "What about Avella?" Doc Avery Boone asked from the shadows. "El Cuervo's got his eye on her. That's why they're drinking hard tonight." Rhett's jaw clenched. "She won't be there when it starts. Eldrin, you tell her to head over to Doc's. Say she's got a headache, needs medicine. Make something up. Doc, keep her safe until the fireworks start." Eldrin gave a slow nod from his post by the door, eyes scanning the street. Out there, the town of Rattler's End was bracing for war, and Rhett Calloway, ghost from the Badlands, was about to bring it to their doorstep. While Rhett Calloway spoke quietly with 3 men who'd slipped in through the rear of the livery, the tension in the air could have choked a mule. There was Drax Vorn, once the mine's foreman, Rig Fallon, the burly town blacksmith, and Doc Avery Boone, whose hands had stitched up half the territory. Rhett knelt, drawing a rough map in the dirt with the edge of his boot knife. "The ventilation shafts are ticket in," he said, eyes sharp. "Eldrin Marrow told me it opens up behind the assay office. That's where they're stashing the silver and most of the firepower. But they'll be watching. They're expecting something," Drax muttered. "After today's ruckus at the store, they're bracing for a straight-up shootout." Rhett cut in. "That's why they've packed the saloon with gunmen." He pointed to spots on the dirt map. "What they don't know is, while they're all watching me, you 3 will be getting the townsfolk into place." Doc Boone frowned. "The townsfolk? Rhett, they're scared stiff. They won't fight." "They don't have to," Rhett replied. "They just need to be ready to move when it's time." He turned to Fallon. "How many can you tuck away in your old smithy?" Riggs scratched his beard. "Maybe 20, 30 if we squeeze." "Good. When it starts, that's where the women and children go. Drax, you'll guide them through the back alleys to the shaft. Doc, have your wagon packed with every bandage and bottle you got. Park it at the Bitter Creek crossing." The barn fell silent, the gravity of what they were about to do pressing down like a storm about to break. After a long beat, Drax spoke. "Why are you really doing this, Rhett? This ain't your fight." Rhett stood up, brushing dirt off his coat. 3 months back, I got a letter. from Avella Mero, smuggled out with help from a trader. She wrote about what was going on here: forced labor, hostages, fear running thick in the dust. But most of all, she wrote about her daughter, watching her father crumble one day at a time. He checked his revolvers, quick and clean. And the kids, crying themselves to sleep every damn night. At some point, a man's got to ask what kind of world he's willing to let keep spinning. Rig leaned in. But why you? What makes you? What do they call you again? Rhett didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to a faraway place. During the war, I ran with a unit that specialized in disruption, sabotage, confusion. We could drop a camp to its knees with 2 sticks of powder and the right timing. Afterward, he shrugged. I found a way to use those skills that lets me sleep at night. Shouts rang out from the street. More ravens had arrived at the saloon. Hooves thundered, dust swirling in the dusk. Through the barn slats, they spotted Cade Thorne dismounting, his silver-handled revolver flashing in the last light. Rhett's jaw set. It's time. Wait for the first blast, then move. Fast. Everything's gonna fall apart real quick after that. He turned to Eldrin Marrow. Get back to the mine. When you hear the boom, move the families. And Eldrin... He paused, voice softer. Tonight, your daughter sees her father stand tall. As the others melted into the growing dark, Rhett straightened his hat, glanced at himself in a horse trough. The man staring back looked calm, almost lazy. Just another drifter passing through. But his eyes, cold steel in the twilight, hinted at the storm coming. From the saloon drifted laughter, glass breaking, Voss Emberfall and his ravens celebrating what they thought was another win. They didn't know the feast was about to flip. Rhett stepped out into the open, spurs whispering their song across the packed earth. He was headed to a dinner party, all right. The saloon was packed to the rafters when Rhett pushed through the doors. Well, I'll be, said Voss, standing at the bar. Carson City, Tombstone, Silver Springs. A stranger shows up. All hell breaks loose, then, poof, he's gone like smoke. He raised his drink in a mocking toast. Gotta admit, impressive. Cade Thorne leaned in at his brother's shoulder, whispering in Spanish. Voss's expression didn't change, but his eyes turned sharp. Seems some of my men spotted your old pal Eldrin Marrow sneaking around the mine. Funny thing, everyone thought he was 6 feet under. Rhett took a sip of his whiskey. Outside, the sun had vanished, stars breaking across the sky like quiet promises. Strange world, he said calmly. Plenty of dead men walking lately. Voss smiled coldly. Indeed. He rose, wooden chair scraping like a warning. No more dancing, senor. You're here for the mine, the workers, maybe the silver. But this place, it ain't like your little past adventures. This here's my town. These are my people. Rhett Calloway didn't flinch. Still seated, he replied calmly, Funny. Don't recall seeing your name on the deed. The saloon had fallen deathly silent. Every raven in the room was watching now, fingers twitching near holsters. Outside the window, Rhett spotted faint movement. Townsfolk slinking through shadows, creeping toward Drax Vorn's smithy with hushed urgency. You know what I think? Voss Emberfall said, voice slick with venom. I think you're not half as clever as you pretend to be. I think you just walked straight into my snare. See, I knew someone would show up. Marshal, lawman, hero, didn't matter. He snapped his fingers. More ravens stepped out from behind the bar, down from the loft, even out the kitchen. Count 'em, senor. 40 men, loyal, ruthless. Rhett finally rose, dusting off his long coat like he had all the time in the world. "That's a whole lot of mouths to feed," he said. "Must cost a pretty penny." "They earn it," Emberfall snapped. "You could have too. But instead..." In a blink, he whipped out his pistol and jammed the barrel against Rhett's chest. "Instead, you chose death. For what? Some worthless act of heroism?" The clock on the wall struck 9. "Thing about heroes," Rhett muttered. "They're usually just the bait." The explosion shook the saloon before anyone could blink. Glass shattered, bottles rained down. 2 more blasts followed, sending the Ravens into a panic. Emberfall stumbled, grip on the gun faltering. That's all Rhett needed. In one smooth motion, he batted the weapon aside and drove his fist into Emberfall's throat. The gang leader reeled, choking. Chaos exploded. Ravens lunged for their guns. Through broken windows, flames danced across rooftops, and distant screams filled the night. Cade Thorne barked orders, trying to form a defense, but the attack was coming from too many directions. None of them clear. Rhett slipped through the storm, Emberfall gasping on the floor. At the door, he paused. "One more thing," he called over his shoulder. "You might want to check the mine. Pretty sure your hostages are long gone." Emberfall's eyes went wide, first in horror, then fury, as a 4th blast turned the night sky blood red. The real fight for Rattler's end had just begun. But not even the sharpest strategy survives first contact with hell. Rhett ducked out just as bullets chewed through the doorframe. Emberfall's rage echoed behind him, Spanish orders cracking through the smoke. The street outside was fire and madness. Rig Fallon's powder stores had done their job, and maybe too well. The assay office was ablaze, flames licking at nearby rooftops. Through the haze, Rhett saw townsfolk rushing toward the smithy, but not enough of them. Something was off. "Drex!" he shouted, grabbing the sooty former foreman. "Where's everyone else?" Drax Vorn's face was smeared with ash. "They've got more men at the mine than we figured, holding back families, using them as shields. Eldrin stuck up there with them." Before Rhett could answer, a scream cut through the night. Avila. He spun toward Doc Avery Boone's clinic, just in time to see Cade Thorne hauling her out, silver-handled revolver pressed against her skull. Doc lay motionless in the doorway. "Shadow!" Emberfall's voice bellowed from the saloon entrance, lips bloodied from Rhett's earlier punch. "You want a game? Let's play." He fired 2 shots into the air. "My men at the mine have orders. Every minute I don't get a signal, they kill a hostage. Starting with the Reed girl." Rhett dropped behind a water trough as bullets ripped the air. The plan had been built on confusion, speed, but Emberfall was adapting faster than expected, and colder. 10 seconds, Shadow," Emberfall roared. "Show your face, or the girl dies first. Then we start on the others." Through the rising smoke, Rhett spotted Bram Litchfield stumbling out of the burning saloon, eyes wide with terror as he saw his daughter in Cade Thorne's grip. The old man reached for a fallen Raven's pistol. "Bram, no!" Rhett shouted. But it was too late. Thorne turned and fired without hesitation. Bram crumpled. Avila's scream, "Papa!" ripped through the chaos louder than the fire itself. Time froze for Rhett. Another town, another father, another girl screaming in the night. He'd been too young to act back then, too scared. But not tonight. "Last chance, Shadow," Emberfall howled. "Or should I tell my men at the mine to start with Eldrin Marrow's wife? Make him watch before we kill him too?" Rhett Calloway shut his eyes briefly, just long enough for Sarah's last letter to flicker in his mind. The hope she carried in her words, The way Avella looked at him that morning, clinging to the belief he could protect them all. He'd seen that look in too many towns, seen it die too often. He exhaled hard. "All right," he called, rising slow from behind the water trough. "Let's talk." Voss Emberfall grinned like the devil himself. "Drop your guns, all of them." Rhett let them fall, both revolvers landing with dull, final thuds in the dirt. Around them, fire crept across rooftops, casting a blood-red light that made the whole street look like the edge of hell. "Now walk to me," Voss ordered, voice low and certain. As Rhett stepped into the open, he caught a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. Young Fenn, the storekeeper's boy, crawling through the smoke with his father's old hunting rifle. Behind Emberfall, Rig Fallon maneuvered near the final powder keg. And on the crumbling roof of the saloon, Drax Vorn moved into position with a coil of rope. They were all waiting for Rhett's signal. Ordinary folks, scared, angry, tired, but ready to stake everything on one final push for freedom. It reminded Rhett of another fire, another town, another time when he'd been just a boy, watching everything he knew burn to the ground. But tonight would be different. "You know what your mistake was, Shadow?" Voss sneered as he raised his gun to Rhett's chest. "You thought fear was enough. You thought some explosions would break their loyalty." He chuckled, dry and cruel. "But fear is my currency. And tonight, everyone learns what happens when they push back." Then it came. The sound. Not a gunshot, not a scream. A silver bell. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The emergency signal from the mine. Voss's smug grin faltered. That wasn't his men's call. Which meant, no, Rhett said quietly, letting a smile touch his lips. "Your real mistake was thinking this was ever about me." Then hell broke loose. Not from the stranger, but from the townsfolk of Ratler's End, who'd finally chosen what kind of world they were willing to live in. No more strategy, no more waiting, just blood and reckoning in the desert night. The bell's echo hadn't even faded when chaos erupted. Fenn's shot from the shadows missed wide, alerting the ravens. Rig made a break with the keg, only to dive behind a burning wagon under heavy fire. Drax's rooftop diversion collapsed, literally when half the saloon caved beneath him. Voss reacted with terrifying speed. "Kill them all," he bellowed, firing at Rhett, who dove behind a rain barrel just as bullets tore it apart, spraying water and splinters. Amid the madness, Avella made her move. She slammed an elbow into Cade Thorne's ribs. He grunted, then struck her down cold with the butt of his silver-handled revolver. "Brother!" Cade shouted to Voss. "We need to get to the mine." Through smoke and scattered shouts, Rhett saw the plan unraveling. The townspeople had the courage, but not the coordination. They were fighters now, but not soldiers. A bullet nicked his shoulder as he dove for his revolvers, only to be cut off by two ravens. He hurled himself through the shattered window of the general store, landing hard on broken glass. "Got you now, Shadow," one of the men growled, stepping inside. But he didn't check the corners. Brivin Hale emerged from behind a shelf, swinging a butcher's cleaver. And suddenly the raven had bigger problems. Rhett used the distraction to scramble deeper, eyes searching for an exit. Through a cracked back window, he saw Voss and Cade mounting up, Avila's unconscious body draped across Cade's saddle. "They're heading for the mine," Drax yelled from somewhere on the street. "They'll kill everyone still in there." Rhett finally reached his revolvers, snatching them from the ground just as three more ravens crashed through the door. He dropped two in seconds, but the third got off a lucky shot, striking his arm and spinning him hard into a shelf of canned goods. The pain seared hot, but he stayed upright. What cut deeper was the sound of hooves fading. Voss and Cade were getting away. "Rusk Hanley!" Rhett shouted from behind the counter as bullets thudded into the walls. "Get that last keg to the livery stable." But Rusk was pinned down, and the Ravens were regrouping, shaking off the surprise, falling back into their bloody rhythm. These weren't just thugs. They were seasoned killers, and they were far from done. Through a gap in the shelf, Rhett watched the street begin to flood with more of Voss's men, drawn by the sound of rising war. The explosion meant to seal their escape route never came. Something in the plan had failed. Shadows moved. Doc Avery Boone crouched low in the alley behind the general store. A message had slipped through. Avela's father had sent word. The mine rescue had fallen apart. Voss Emberfall had more men buried deep in the tunnels. Now both hostage groups were in his grasp. Rhett Calloway's mind reeled. Dibris T-Bride, Gornomifer, and the sharp, bitter ache in his arm told him things were spiraling fast. His strategy of splitting their forces, hoping to scatter the Ravens' reaction, had done the opposite. Instead, it scattered the townsfolk's unity. Then a thunderous blast shattered the night, but not from their powder barrels. The Ravens had found Rig Fallon's hidden cache of ammo and used it against them. The explosion sent the townsfolk diving for cover, their resolve buckling in the face of killers who now owned the chaos. "Fall back," Rhett bellowed, voice like steel scraping rock. "Head to the church." This wasn't in the plan. But plans didn't matter anymore. What mattered was surviving long enough to outthink Voss Emberfall before he turned this disaster into a bloodbath. Rhett ran with them, pain pulsing down his arm, the cold weight of failure pressing heavier than the wound. He'd misjudged Voss, banked too much on the element of surprise, and now Avila, the Litchfield family, and every soul in that mine would pay for it, unless... Through the smoke, blood, and grit, a different idea clawed its way into Rhett's mind. No clever misdirection, no layered schemes. Something simpler, riskier, probably suicidal. But first, he had to survive the Ravens tightening around the store. Glass crunched beneath boots. They were closing in. This night wasn't done with him yet, and the worst was still ahead. Below the church, dim lanterns cast flickering shadows across the stone walls. Doc Boone leaned over Rhett's wounded arm, metal tools gleaming with each movement. Upstairs, Drax Vorn and Rig Fallon took turns watching the street through warped glass. Every few moments, the sound of Ravens barking orders filtered through the floorboards. "Hold still," Doc muttered, digging deeper with his forceps. The bullet had lodged tight against bone. Rhett didn't flinch. His pale gray eyes were locked on something far beyond this room. He was burning up, but his thoughts were sharp, fixed on the idea taking form. They had maybe an hour before Voss Emberfall started killing again. "Got it," Doc said at last, pulling the bullet free with a slick, wet sound. He set to stitching the wound, but his gaze flicked up at Rhett's face. "You've been shot before." "Plenty," Rhett answered low. Scars mapped his skin like ghost trails, memories inked in blood and fire. "These here, cavalry saber," Doc muttered, tracing a line on his ribs. "And this, burn pattern, cannon fire. You weren't just another soldier, were you?" Rhett stayed silent. Above them, Rig Fallon barked orders to the survivors. Only 24 made it to the church, out of a town that once held hundreds. "I need paper," Rhett said suddenly, "ink, and someone who knows the mine layout better than the back of their hand." Footsteps descended. Drax Vorn appeared, his face hard. "They've pulled back to the ridge above the mine," he said. "They've got every approach covered. We're not getting close without being seen." "We're not sneaking in," Rhett said, taking the paper and pen from Doc's hand. "We're walking through the front." The others stared at him, stunned. Maybe he was mad. The fever was clawing up his spine, but his vision had never felt clearer. "You told me about the older tunnels," Rhett said to Drax, already sketching, "the ones from back when the silver dried up." The ex-foreman leaned close, pointing. "They connect to the main shaft, here, and there. That's how they snuck up on us last time." "And the ventilation shaft?" "Still comes out behind the assay office, but they'll be watching it now." Rhett nodded, drawing fast, adding arrows and notes. "What about the dynamite storage?" he asked. Drax froze. "You're not serious." "One shot in the wrong place, we bring the whole mountain down." "Exactly." The room went dead quiet. Only the scratch of Rhett's pen and the distant, bone-chilling cries of the ravens outside filled the silence. Finally, Rig Fallon spoke from the staircase, his voice grim. "Even if we could reach the powder, even if we managed to set it without tipping them off, you're talking about bringing down part of the mine with hostages inside." "No," Rhett Calloway said, finishing the rough sketch he'd drawn in dirt on the table. "I'm talking about making Voss Emberfall believe we're gonna bring it down. Man's clever, seasoned. He'll think he's covered every base." He paused, his gaze sharpening. "'Cept the one move no sane man would dare pull." One by one, realization flickered in their eyes as Rhett laid out his plan. Simple, ruthless, and so reckless that only a genius like Voss wouldn't expect it. Because it turned his brilliance into a blind spot. "We'll need black powder," Rhett continued. "Not for blasting, for smoke. And I need every mirror y'all can scrounge up in this town. And a ram's horn, anything hollow that'll carry sound," he added. Doc Avery Boone gave a slow shake of his head, part wonder, part disbelief. "You're fixing to use his own mind against him. Feed into what he expects just to blindside him." "Exactly," Rhett nodded. "We make it look like one thing, while we're doing something a whole lot simpler." He stood, wincing as fire lanced through the wound in his shoulder. The stitches held, barely. Drax Vorn stepped forward. "I'll pick 3 men who know the old tunnels, ones who can move quiet." "Rig," Rhett said, turning to Fallon, "I need you gathering supplies. Exact list." He handed over the notes, scribbled with purpose. "And the rest of us?" Doc asked. "Get ready to treat whoever's still breathing. There's going to be plenty before sunup." Rhett checked his revolvers, clicked through each cylinder. Not enough bullets. Never enough, and I'll need one more hand. From the shadows stepped Fenn, clutching his late father's battered rifle. His voice barely more than a whisper. "I'll help. I know what needs doing." Rhett studied the boy a long beat. He'd seen that same steel before, in soldiers too young to fight and too old to run. "It's dangerous." "So's living like this," Fenn answered, steady. Outside, the desert night quieted to a hush, the kind that comes just before something terrible. Up at the mine, Voss Emberfall was likely feeling real smug, thinking he'd already won, thinking like the tactician he was, calculating every angle. But some plays are too crazy for a mind like his to even consider. And sometimes, the insane move is the only one that works. Rhett looked around at the faces in that room. A worn-out doctor, a grizzled foreman, a blacksmith with a busted hand, a Chinese kid with an old rifle. They weren't soldiers, weren't outlaws, just folks who'd finally had enough. "Let's get moving," Rhett said quietly. We've got hell to raise before dawn. The pre-dawn dark lay thick over the desert as Rhett Calloway approached the mine. Alone, hands raised in surrender. Up on the ridge, dozens of ravens lined the rocks, rifles fixed on him like teeth bared in the night. Each step sent fire through his arm, but he didn't blink. His eyes were locked on the man at the mine entrance. Voss Emberfall, and right beside him, Cade Thorne. "So," Voss called out, his voice cutting clean through the silence. The ghost finally shows his face. Behind him, Avila lay motionless, guarded by two of Voss's men. "Drop your irons and come forward," he barked. Rhett didn't flinch. He let both revolvers fall to the dust. As he walked closer, he caught sight of the hostages. Men, women, children, eyes wide, bound in fear, herded like cattle near the shaft. Among them, Eldrin Marrow, battered, bloodied, but still alert, watching every step Rhett took. "You know what puzzles me?" Voss said as Rhett got close. "A man like you, with your past, your skill. You had to know this plan was doomed. So why show up?" "Maybe I ain't as smart as folks say," Rhett answered with a slow shrug. Voss chuckled, though his eyes were hunting. "No. There's more to it. You wanted to be caught, which means—" He squinted. "This is another damn trick." "Check him," he barked. Two of the ravens rushed forward, rough and fast. They found nothing, just blood-soaked bandages and a fevered brow. But before Voss could gloat, a strange flicker caught his eye. A glint, then another, then three. "Signals!" he shouted, spinning toward the opposite ridge. "They're setting up a flank. Diego, take half the men and—" But the chaos didn't come from the ridge. Fenn had done his part. Those mirrors cast ghost flashes like a phantom army on the hill. The real strike came from below. Drax Vorn and his men had crawled the forgotten tunnels, placing black powder where it counted, not to bury the hostages, but to unleash a wall of smoke and madness. Charges thundered. Ram's horns blared from every direction. Rig Fallon's team howled and stomped like they were an entire army. The ravens turned, confused, spooked, and in that perfect moment, hell opened its gates. Their focus was split wide open. But Rhett Calloway wasn't wasting a second of it. The moment that first blast tore through the ground, he dropped like a rock and rolled, springing up with a derringer that had been tucked in his boot. The one damn place the ravens hadn't thought to check. The first bullet slammed into Cade Thorne's chest before the outlaw could even lift his silver-gripped iron. But Voss Emberfall was quicker. Like smoke curling out of nowhere, his gun flashed into his grip and barked fire toward Rhett. But Rhett was already moving, diving low toward Avella as the hostages scattered into the smoky chaos. His second shot rang wild, his aim twisted off by the pain in his wounded arm. "Clever!" Voss shouted through the madness, but not clever enough. He swung his pistol to gun down the fleeing townsfolk. But what happened next would be told and twisted in every saloon west of the divide for years to come. Some swore Rhett moved faster than a man should. Others claimed Voss's pistol jammed. But the truth? It was simpler than all that. In his pride, Voss Emberfall had broken the first law of gunfighting. Never take your eyes off the wounded. Rhett's body collided with him, waist high and full force, sending both men tumbling toward the edge of the old shaft. Voss's gun flew out of his hand as the two wrestled in the choking dust. Fevered and bleeding, Rhett still held his ground, throwing fists with everything he had. "Why?" Voss growled, breath ragged as they grappled. "Why throw it all away for these people?" Rhett answered with a headbutt that cracked like a hammer. Voss staggered. "Because someone has to. Rhett spat, steadying himself. Voss yanked a blade free and slashed, wild and vicious. "I'll gut you slow," he hissed. "Make you watch as I burn everything you—" The words died in his throat. Rhett had twisted the knife from his grip and buried it deep in the man's chest, driven home with quiet fury. Voss's eyes stretched wide with shock before his knees buckled. He hit the ground silent. Around them, the battle burned itself out. With their leader down and their leverage gone, the ravens began tossing their weapons to the dirt. The townsfolk, armed now and surging from the shadows, took control. Eldrin Marrow clutched his wife and daughter tight. Avella was being tended by Doc Avery Boone. The tide had turned. Rhett knelt beside the dying man. "You were right," he murmured. "I ain't half as clever as folks think." He stood, wiping blood from his brow. Sometimes the dumbest plan's the best one. Just get up again. Till the bad men don't. By sunrise, Rattler's End looked like a different place. The ravens were chained, families were hugging tight. Bram Litchfield, still breathing, was already dreaming aloud of rebuilding the saloon. The mine? Reopening, this time owned by the people. Rhett turned down every offer to stay. By nightfall, his horse was saddled, his wounds freshly bandaged by Doc Boone. "You ever think about settling down?" Avella asked gently, handing him a sack of provisions. "Finding a place to call home?" Rhett tilted his hat low, squinting toward the open desert. "This is home," he said. "Wherever folks need help." As he rode off beneath a quilt of stars, little Fenn stood beside his father, Briven Hale, and asked, "Will we see him again?" Briven gave a soft nod. "Maybe. When another town needs a shadow to show them their strength." And so the story of Rattler's End didn't end with one man's fight, but with a town that found its spine in the dark. As for Rhett Calloway, he rode on, chasing whispers. Towns in trouble, wrongs that needed righting. Some men ain't meant to plant roots. Some only find peace in standing tall. Behind him, the lights of Rattler's End flickered like fallen stars, each one a safe home tonight. And for Rhett, that was enough. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.